Thank you, everybody, for joining us today and taking the time to allow Prodoscore and Fastblue Communications to present to you a solution that a lot of our customers are looking into to help support kind of your latest and newer requirements for being more flexible work environment for your employees. Just if you're not aware and if you're new to Fastblue, we're a single source provider for global connectivity. We partner with a lot of customers to help them find the best ISP or carrier or any kind of solution, just as like Prodoscore today, all over the world. So we're vendor neutral. So no matter what your requirements are, we're going to help you evaluate your situation and your issues and your requirements, and then help you achieve your business goals. So we also provide pre and post sale support, project management, 24/7 knock to help our customers anytime they need to escalate, drive trouble tickets, and get their problems quickly resolved. Our customers are very important to us. So we're not a huge shop, we're a small boutique shop, and we take very good care of our customers, give them that old school feel of they can pick up the phone, call somebody, someone will be on the line to help them. So today we have Prodoscore. We're presenting Prodoscore to a few of our customers and want to just share their capabilities. And I'm going to hand over the microphone to David. He's going to take you through who they are, what they do, and how they can help your company.
Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate that, Kit. And I'm David Powell, and I'm the president here at Prodoscore. I joined back in May, and I come out of the cybersecurity MSP space. So I had been at a cybersecurity software company, and then we got acquired into another company, and then had this opportunity to come over to Prodoscore, and really excited to be here because this is such a hot topic that's occurring really in like every company across America. So today we want to really talk about what is the new normal of work look like for everybody. And this is a big, change coming across, but I think it helps to think back to like what we call the before times, right? Before coronavirus, everyone was in the office. If you, were in that world, the fight over the conference room, who has a conference room, who has an available conference room, your meeting's running late and everyone else is standing outside the conference room with their laptops, people grabbing lunch together, talking about their interest with their coworkers. I mean, being in the office was, fun for a lot of folks, and it was a great way to engage and a great way to be productive and to collaborate. You felt part of a team when you were in the office. That whole shared experience builds those relational bonds that makes work, fun and engaging. When you're, having these shared victories, when you're overcoming adversity together, all those things are super positive that were in the before times, right? When we were all sitting in the office together. I think a lot of companies had these edgy offices with open concepts. You were sitting shoulder to shoulder. You had almond milk and LaCroix in the fridge and Cliff Bars in the drawer in the break room. And, it was this great kind of office culture that, most companies are really trying to foster and build on and create that, relational capital inside the office when you're working with one another. Most companies have moved away from private offices to the shared open concept. The idea around that was to increase collaboration and employee engagement. I mean, let's be real, for a lot of companies, it's also to save expense because you can cram a whole bunch of people together on some IKEA desks. You don't have to have quite as much Class A office space. But the before times also came with soul-crushing commutes, right? Is that you had to like pile into some kind of public transportation. You had to spend a whole bunch of money just to get to work each day, or you had to sit in traffic. And there's all this challenge around, what time do I need to leave to be able to get to my kid's baseball game or to this recital or to the gym class that I've been wanting to commit to since January 1st. I heard an interesting phrase one time. People that come to the gym after January 1st, they're resolutionaries, right? So that they had a resolution to come to the gym. So the before times were great in a lot of ways, but they also carried dry cleaning, childcare expenses. Who's going to walk the dog? Am I going to get to all the places I need to be? And there was a challenge around that. And so I think we have these kind of or companies have views of the before times of being like, oh, great, and just this perfect kind of moment. But that experience wasn't always shared with everyone or necessarily with all employees. And then one day, last March, everything changed, right? Instead of being shoulder to shoulder with your office friends, everyone that you work with is in a tiny little box, on a screen. You begin to wonder, like, who are these people? Do I even know this person? I can't believe that we, even work together. And you start getting distracted. What books are on their bookshelf? Or, oh, wow, they have a nice looking work from home space. And I'm sitting here at my kitchen table with, unfolded laundry on the sofa behind me. So, everyone's kind of thrown into a different mix. You've got kids doing online school, which, let's be real, online school is horrible. Online school for like elementary students is like particularly horrible, right? But the good news is that, man, we all made it work. Is that, we kept business rolling, we did our jobs, and we kind of acclimated ourselves to this kind of new work environment of working from home. What I think is interesting is that you may have wondered, do I have the personal discipline to work from home? And you found out that you did. Your company may have been like a butts and seats type of workplace where everyone needed to be in the office. There was no remote work option. There was no hybrid environment. Everyone showed up and sat in their space and did their thing. And now they're like 16, 17, 18 months into this like free trial of what does work from home look like. So you don't miss those commutes. You don't miss the dry cleaning bills. I mean, quite frankly, before when you're in the office, it used to annoy you when Steve in accounting would come and talk to you about his kids' travel baseball team. Now you might even be wondering how Steve's kids' travel baseball team is doing, right? So we made it work, but there's some challenges that come from that too. I think what I saw this the other day on social media, which kind of cracked me up, which is true, is that I think companies have this idea that people are more productive in the office, but there are a lot of distractions in the office. What happens at home most of the time is like people just work and they work a lot. And that kind of creates this sense of like, is there work-life separation? I think we talk a lot about like work-life balance, but really this work-life separation is now work has really kind of elbowed its way into every part of our home existence. I mean, for me personally, I've been a remote employee in the various companies I've worked for in the last 5 years or so. And one of the things I learned when I first started doing that is that I missed that 20-minute commute. Now, granted, 20 minutes isn't that long, but it was a good way for me to kind of adjust and say, okay, I'm transitioning from working David, and I'm transitioning into husband and father David. And then when I come home, I can kind of be, ready for that. So maybe I'm listening to some music or a podcast or talk radio or whatever to kind of, be prepared to enter the home space. Now, my kitchen literally is like right there on the other side of the sliding door. So when I wrap up a call, I open the door and I'll just walk immediately in there to eat dinner or something. So there's no more separation. It's just kind of always up on top of you. And that's the thing that a lot of people have kind of learned from this working from home. So you've got this challenge of working from home. You're working all the time, right from when you wake up to right before you go to dinner. First thing you look at when your alarm goes off is your phone, and now you're getting engaged on all of that kind of stuff. And some of us are blessed to have dedicated workspace. I'm fortunate to have this space in here, but a lot of us don't. We were sharing this space with the entire family. And while I think everyone would say that seeing the family more is good, most people need some privacy and separation for their work at home to be truly effective. And then you got companies that are looking at their P&L, and one of the top expenses on the P&L is people and then rent. Those two are always pretty much number one and number two. And so senior leadership's reading all these articles about how 30 to 50% of the workforce wants to stay remote and might quit if they're forced to come out to the office. One survey that we saw here at Prodoscore, they interviewed, I think, a couple of thousand people and asked them, if you had the opportunity to get a $30,000 a year raise to come into the office or forfeit the $30,000 a year raise and stay at home, what would you do? And 64% of the survey respondents said that they would forego the raise to continue to be remote. So you've got these employers looking at this empty office space, tumbleweed rolling through, the cubicles, and they're trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we bring people back, or do we not bring people back? Do we need to sublet this space? Do we need to sign a different lease? They're wondering, how do we build company culture if no one is in the office? So you've got employees chirping in senior leadership's one ear saying like, hey, I like being remote, I want to stay remote. You've got HR chirping in the other side of their ear saying, hey, we need to build culture. We need these people to want to feel connected to the office. How do we do that if they're remote? You got finance chirping at them saying like, hey, how in the world do we, continue to afford this expensive office space if no one's using it? You've got their security people chirping at them saying, hey, when we sent everybody home last March, we didn't do it with a cybersecurity plan. We just sent people home. Now we need to figure this out. And so leadership's getting bombarded from all these different sides with all these different, questions. And how do they figure this out? Like, what in the world is the path forward? So a couple of ways to think about this is like, number one, it's a struggle. right? And I think that we want to make sure that we are empathetic to our peers and that we're empathetic to the market and that we give ourselves a little bit of, grace. Is that most people don't know what to do here, right? There is no easy answer. As a business person, usually there's someone you can call, like, hey, we had a sexual harassment problem in our office. How did you deal with that? Or, hey, we're struggling with this one manager that's really well liked, but his performance is bad. How do we manage that? Or whatever it may be. We're thinking about selling, or we're about to get acquired. There's people you can call and seek guidance. But in this, no one's done this before. No one's ever had to come up with a return to work plan after a global pandemic in a remote, hybrid, technologically enabled workforce. That just never happened. So everyone's figuring this out on their own. So I think it's important for all of us to be like, it's okay, right? If we don't have a plan, if we don't know what to do, there's no one else that does, right? So we need to be very friendly, we need to be very collaborative, and we need to reach across to some of our peers and like, what are y'all doing? And talk it out, because no one has this licked quite yet. So the first thing is you need a plan, right? Hope is not a plan. So a lot of people hope to figure this out, right? But you have to have a plan. What I think is interesting is that no one had a plan for coronavirus, but we made it work. Much like in the NCAA tournament. In the NCAA basketball tournament every year, there's this phrase that they use called survive and advance. So if Duke or North Carolina or UCLA, whoever your team is, if they play poorly in the Sweet 16, doesn't matter. They're going to move to the next round. So if you win by 1 or win by 100, doesn't matter. The goal is to advance to the next round. So there's this idea of like survive and advance. That's also this idea of like, recovering alcoholics just have to get through today. That's really the way most people have managed their workplace for the last over a year, right? Is that we send everyone home, take the monitor off your desk, go home, we'll figure it out. And a lot of people haven't been back to the office in like 15 months. So was there a plan? Nope. Did people like have their coronavirus pandemic plan to execute? Nope. They just sent everybody home and figured it out. However, leadership's not going to let you come back to the office absent a plan. So to come back to the office and to come back in person and to do all that, you're going to have a plan. So you need to begin thinking now, how do we plan for this? What do we do? If you think that you can just kind of like, okay, everybody come back, we're going back to normal, that's really not the way it's going to work. Just before this call, I was on with someone and they were talking about how they were a shoulder-to-shoulder IKEA desk office space. And now no one wants to come back and sit shoulder-to-shoulder, that you need spacing. Even if you're vaccinated, they're like, people now kind of have this phobia about just being super close. And so they've got to figure something else out as they go forward. Second, you need to talk to your people, right? I think it's really important to solicit feedback from your employees, have real conversations with them, right? And be open to hearing what they have to say. Some of your people will be like, I am desperate to come back to the office. I need to come back. I want to be here. Other people may be like, I don't ever need to come back, right? I'm fine. I'm productive. I'm really cool with the way things are going right now. I've moved cities. I've heard that multiple times. A call I was on today, they're in Chicago. And what he found is that most of their employees used to live downtown close to their office. Well, that's very expensive. During the last year, a bunch of them moved to the suburbs. And now he's got this really nice office space downtown, and all those people are going to have long commutes and don't want to come back. So you need to talk through that, with them, but have real conversations with your people. Survey data, Wall Street Journal articles, those are all fantastic, right? But those aren't your people. You need to sit down and talk to your people and understand, what do they want to do? Do they want to come back? Do they want to stay remote? And then hear all that out. I think it's going to be an interesting position companies are about to be in, where they're going to have to help answer some really kind of existential questions for their employees. Is that employees need to figure out, how much of my human experience did I get in the office? Did I enjoy my coworkers? Did I enjoy going to lunch? Is that where my friends were? Did we go hiking and camping or whatever it is with these friends I made in the office? Or was work just something I do? And my human experience, my connective tissue comes from my community and my family and all that. And there's not a right or wrong answer, but your employees do have answers in that. And companies are going to have to be in a position to help address what makes sense for each employee and how they view work. Is that important to their human experience and who they are as an individual? And then 3, I think you have to plot a path forward. So you need to come up with a plan. So what are all the things we need to think through? Do we need to think through cybersecurity? Do we need to think through office space utilization? Do we need to think through whatever it may be from that standpoint? To talk to your people so that your plan can accommodate all these different aspects and requirements and demands and asks and pleadings that you may get from your employees. And then 3, figure out a path forward. But I think it's super important that your path forward really needs to be malleable. So think about Waze. I love Waze. If you don't use Waze on your phone, get Waze on your phone and don't use Google Maps or Apple. Use that instead because Waze is great. So number 1, Waze tells you where police are, which if you are afflicted like I am with a really heavy right foot, then that's a very positive thing to know where the police are. But more importantly, Waze uses real-time data and reroutes you based on traffic. Now, I'm one of those guys that I do not like sitting in traffic. We were talking earlier about LA traffic. I used to work in Santa Barbara, and I'd be coming down to go to the airport, and my GPS would say I've got all this time to go, like just a few short miles. But when I'd hit the 405, everything came to a screeching halt, and Waze would redirect me and get me off and take me these other back roads. I feel like I drove through some guy's backyard one time, but you just follow Waze, but Waze adapts the route based on current conditions. That's the way that your plan needs to be. You need to have a loose plan that you can adapt based on conditions. So if people start to come back, or if public health authorities change their guidance or whatever, you need to have a plan that can morph, change, move, and adapt based on the conditions that you're hearing from both your employees and from outside sources. But every job is easier if you have the right tools. So I have a friend of mine who bought a 1979 International Scout, which is this SUV truck thing. It's really a farm implement is what it is. But I was helping him work on it. And it was amazing because, we were able to accomplish things. I never fancied myself as the kind of the guy that worked on cars, but a lot of it is if you have the right tool. And he'd worked on several other cars. And so we're like, oh, we need this. And we turn around and there this tool was. And any job you do is a lot easier if you have the right tools. Prodoscore is like that, right? Prodoscore is a tool that you need to make your return to work plan more feasible. Otherwise, you only have blunt instruments. If you've ever tried to use the wrong tool and the wrong thing, and it's very imprecise and you end up, screwing stuff up more than you get it to work, the right tool makes that very effective. So right now, most companies don't have the right tools to make these decisions. Right now, a lot of it is like guesswork. A lot of it is kind of that management by walking around. If you think about Peter Drucker's old book from the 1960s or 1950s, The Effective Executive, which is where that concept of management by walking around. And that's still in play now in 2020, is people would walk around the office and they would see, oh, well, I see Kit got here at 8 o'clock today. That means Kit, is ready to work. And then I see he left at 5. Oh, that meant Kit put in a full day. Well, they don't know is that Kit was just standing around the break room, not doing that much that day, right? Is they didn't have sorry, Kit, sorry to call you out. So they don't know that they didn't have all that data. So I have a friend who's a corporate pilot, and he always talks about when they have to get there early and do the pre-flight walk around and check on the plane and all this kind of stuff. That's gives you some visibility, but that's not what you need to fly the plane, right? What you really need to fly the plane is all the data that you're getting up here in the cockpit. So whereas in the office, you might walk around and kind of see, okay, things seem to be in order, things seem to be going the right direction. That's not enough granular data when you can't see all those people. When some of them, you don't really know what they're doing. They may be there at the office, but you don't really have any visibility into what they're doing all the time. And that's what Prodoscore can solve, is that Prodoscore can take these things that you couldn't know before, that you couldn't see before, and make them knowable and make them visible to you. So let's talk about that for a second. Number one, thanks for getting on the call today. You've probably never even heard about Prodoscore, which is fine, right? But you have heard of who's talking about us. And there's a whole list of people: Wall Street Journal, Inc. magazine, Forbes, Fast Company, all these folks are talking about Prodoscore, but what they're really talking about is our data. Is that we have a third-party research group, and this third-party research group takes our data, and it's behavioral scientists, it's data scientists, all these people, and they take our data and they kind of grind it up and then spit out insights, which are really, really, really interesting. And that's why we're getting quoted in all these places. I mean, let's be real, we're kind of small and stuff, but we're landing in great publications because of our data. And that data is that visibility, that cockpit, that dashboard that you're really looking for to have that information. So what's some of the data that our third-party research group has found? Well, this one kind of jumps out, is that they looked across 7,000 different employees across multiple industries. And what they found is that 10% of any workforce is only doing an hour and 30 minutes of trackable work a day. That's it, right? So as I say up here, yes, you read that right. Before your second cup of coffee, or in my world, my second thing of Diet Mountain Dew, 10% of your workforce is not doing any more productive work for the day, right? And so if you've ever paid attention to surveys, like when they do presidential election surveys and stuff, you only need about 1,200. So you'll see, this candidate is at 54% and this candidate is at 46%. And you'll see like 1,200 people surveyed. To statistically significant, if it's a true random sample for the entire country, is only like 1,200 people. We did 7,000, right? So 7,000 data points, people, and then all their underlying data points go into this. So I think if what companies say, oh, well, that's not us, I would say our data says otherwise, right? Is that most likely you have people in your company that aren't doing anything. And an hour and 30 minutes, whether that number should be 4 hours or 5 hours or 3.5, there's no business that an hour and 30 minutes is acceptable, right? So that's the struggle, is that this is happening across industries. And if you have, $60,000 a year employees, that's $48,000 of their $60,000 is essentially unaccounted for, right? That's just like evaporating and you have no idea what you're actually getting for that. So this is one of the kind of the pieces of data that we were able to pull out and render and show, hey, this is what's actually going on that you may not know about. As we think about return to work and how that plays into this, is that you've got two things that seem to be at odds with one another. Is that employees want flexibility. They want to say like, hey, I want to work from wherever I am. I want to work from the lake. I want to work from the beach. I want to work from my parents' house, my in-laws' house, a buddy's place, whatever it may be. As long as I'm doing my job, you shouldn't care where I'm doing it. And I've proved this past year, Mr. Employer, that I can do that from anywhere. Employers, though, say, hey, we have to have accountability. While I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you've done a good job this past year, I just am trusting you're doing a good job. I need accountability. My highest thing on my P&L are people cost, right? And I need to know that I'm getting my money's worth, that if I'm spending this money, that I'm getting something for it. And so now we're in this return to work model. Employees say, hey, I want flexibility. Employers are saying, I want accountability. And those two things seem at odds. However, with Prodoscore, you give them visibility. And I feel like with visibility, it allows both groups to get what they want. It's the only way they both can get what they want, is that now the employee's like, hey, if my score is being tracked, then I'm going to do it from wherever, whenever. And the employer now can go to their board and say, hey, we just implemented a hybrid work policy. But we know what they're doing because we get this nice report every single day that we can log into and see how are our people actually doing. I talk a lot about this app called Life 360, and Life 360 is an app I have on my family's phones, but my daughter is 4 years younger than my son. And my son they didn't have Life 360 when he was coming up. And so what happened is I would like text him, hey, where are you? Or you need to text me when you change locations, or text me when you're headed home, or whatever. And there's a little bit of like micromanagement that kind of goes into that, because, it's just like any other parent, you want to know where they are and what they're doing. With my daughter, we had Life 360 on her phone. So now I don't ever have to pester her. I don't have to text her, because I can see where she is. I can see when she's headed home. So if it's like 15 minutes to curfew, I can check, oh, she's headed home. So there's no need to bug her. That's really what you get here, is that with Prodoscore deployed, there's more freedom, because they know that that's being tracked, and the company can have that comfort of knowing that they have that accountability. So the visibility piece allows people to better understand how they're using their day, both personally, and my manager gets to know that. So we get levels of engagement, so we can see who's using the systems, who's not. One of our clients told us this story where they had a top producing sales guy that had a really low productivity score. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So they call him up and talk to him, and he says, oh, well, I call all my clients on my cell phone and I text them. And they're like, well, that's great, but now you're operating outside of our company issued systems. So we're paying a lot of money for Salesforce. We pay a lot of money for your UCaaS platform, and we need you to, put that stuff in so that we can have visibility into that. And he's like, okay. And so he did it, but that was a great way to find that insight around who's not using the tools that we're issuing out to all of our employees. Then this whole idea of whether you're going to be remote, in office, combination of the two. Research shows right now that 30 to 50% are going to stay remote. That's a big number, right? So if 30 to 50 are going to stay remote, now you need the confidence of knowing that wherever they are, that they're actually working. Costs. Having people in the office doesn't necessarily mean that they're working. Or what if you're in an environment where a whole team is in the office and the manager is remote? How is he going to know if he can't walk around? And there's this false idea, I think, still that walking around gave you all the data that you needed. And then this idea of like, what does accountability really look like? How do we hold our employees accountable for the daily contributions? Most all companies that I'm aware of, if you turn in an expense report, you have to have detail. Here's a $3,000 expense report. You can't just turn that in and then cut you a check for $3,000. You have to say, I spent it on this, 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 this. I was at this hotel, at this conference, I took this flight and all that stuff. Right now, in most companies, your employees are turning in what's effectively an 8-hour timesheet every day with no detail, right? Prodoscore fills in the detail. So if you've got your employees that are putting in 8 hours of work, but you have no idea what they're doing during that time, there's a lot of trust there, but there's not a lot of accountability. And I think that trust and accountability go together in the workforce. So how do you think about Prodoscore? I say you think about it like a check engine light. So when a check engine light goes on, do you ignore it? Absolutely not. My daughter has a Volvo SUV. It's several years old. And one day the check engine light went on it. And I think it's like a 2011, so it's 10 years old. So the check engine light goes off. And what's the first thing you think as a dad? Like, oh, this is gonna be expensive, right? So she takes it to the shop. And man, all it was this little cable that goes on the spark plugs that has a clamp. And the clamp over time had cracked. So the spark plug cable was kind of loose. And that's what triggered it. $50 repair. Not bad at all. Could have been a transmission. Transmission would have been thousands of dollars, right? But what do you not do? You don't continue to drive it and ignore it. So you take it in, and it could be expensive. It could be cheap. Prodoscore is really that check engine light for your employees. When the Prodoscore comes in and begins to trend the wrong direction, that tells you I need to have a conversation with someone. So if Nadine's number trended down, then I would call Nadine. That's the check engine light flash and say, hey, Nadine, what's going on? It could be an illness. It could be a family issue. It could be any number of things. Could be that her boss is not particularly great and doesn't motivate her. Could be she's burned out and really hates her job. But that's the opportunity to go in and have that conversation then. Don't wait. Just like with anything else, the more you wait, it doesn't get any better. I always joke, never Google any medical condition, because whatever you Google, you're going to die, right? So if you got a hangnail and you Google it, it'll say that you have a hangnail, it gets infected, it goes systemic and you die. So nothing gets better waiting, right? So you should always deal with it sooner. And we're that early warning system, that check engine light that tells you this employee needs to have a conversation. They could be burning out. They could be wanting to quit. But too many companies, the only time that we get that alert is when they come in and drop their 2-week notice on our desk and say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm leaving. I found another gig. And we didn't have the opportunity to intervene beforehand. Prodoscore can give you that kind of data that allows you to intervene beforehand and prevent potentially these negative outcomes that you really don't want and are pretty costly as a business. So when we kind of think about this visibility piece and how does this work in practice, is that, these are the questions that we can answer. Are the employees engaged with the business tools, or do they work outside them? You can kind of look, you spend hundreds of dollars per employee on all these different systems that you give them. So are they using them, or are they kind of sitting there and just wasting that money that goes towards these systems? And then if they're using them, how do you extract insight from them, which we can help with? When does the day start and end? I think that would be, really unique to see in a work from home environment, is that the day has really kind of crept up and it's crept a little bit later. So I have a friend that I used to work with, and she was saying, she said, David, I'm Italian. It takes my hair forever to dry. And she's a big fitness person, so she exercised every morning. And so she got really sweaty. So she's like, I'm not one of those that can just put like dry shampoo and make it happen. And so she was like, look, if I come to the office, it takes me like an hour to shower and dry my hair and get dressed. And then it's like a 40-minute commute to the office. And then in the afternoons, because of the way she has to come back and it's left turns, and so she sit at these lights, it's more like an hour. So she says, that's 2 hours and 40 minutes that today, working from home, I'm working. If I was in the office, I wouldn't be. That time would be chewed up with commutes and drying my hair. So this is great visibility. And when does it start? When does it finish? Are there hard workers you should reward? How do you know who the ones that are just killing it are? And I think in most organizations, it's easy to look at sales and say, oh, well, this guy is achieving, or this gal is achieving, and this guy is not, and this gal is not. But if you can look at it and say, like, what about the rest of the organization? I was talking to a CRO of a really large organization, about 800 employees the other day, talking about Prodoscore. And he said, David, within my sales team, I know who's working. Outside of my sales team, no clue, right? No clue. So he says, I have zero visibility, zero insight. And then this is anyone overworked. I think that for a lot of businesses, there's this sense that they really want to know who that 10% that's not doing anything is, because that's the kind of a motivating thing. I think most business owners kind of in the back of their head have this paranoia that someone's sticking it to them and not really doing much. But really the more costly thing, in my experience, has been like when the really good people quit, right? So if the really good guy that just keeps taking on more and more and more and doing more and more and more just reaches that point where they're like, I can't take on anymore, I'm not gonna do anymore, and they quit, losing a key contributor, a high productive employee that you missed and didn't see the warning signs, that is much more costly to the organization than having somebody that's just not pulling their weight, exiting. So if at the very bottom there's a screenshot of Prodoscore, we can show you throughout the day, right, when they're working, how much they're working, and it gives you that great view. Left side's a high productive person, right side's a low productive person, and what that might look like. This is one of my favorite visualizations in Prodoscore. At the top, just an example of all the different kind of tools that we can pull in. That's not an exhaustive list. That's an example of activity that we can track. And so we can track this activity and then really see what is an employee doing. And if you look here at the bottom, this is a day laid out. And this is for one of Prodoscore's employees from yesterday. So if you look at the bottom, they started and they're doing LinkedIn first, and then they're on a meeting, then they're sending some emails. There's a little icon there for each one of those different activities that they're doing. It shows phone calls that they made. It has some gap time. If you notice, they only had 1 hour and 2 minutes of gap time. What that means is that's just time that's not counted in our system. And that's okay. Is that gap time's not, the end of the world. That just means that they're not doing work that's tracked here. So for example, like yesterday, if I was working on this presentation and taking some notes and handwriting those notes on a notepad, that's going to show up as gap time. That doesn't mean I'm not working. That just shows that I'm not working in a trackable system, that's why we like to compare things against departments. So some departments do a lot more offline work than other departments. So that department score may be a lower productivity score as a department, but you're still looking for that outlier that falls outside the norm within that department. And I like this idea of a productivity-based score. We kind of talk about like the FICO score. Everyone can relate to a score. I just did a refi on my house. Interest rates are ridiculously low. So I went from like 30 years to 20 years, and my payment just went up like $150. That was like a great plan, right? But that's when your credit score comes in. They can look at that credit score and say like, yes, David qualifies for this loan because he has good credit. But they don't need to go through and look at every single data point that underlies that credit score. That credit score gives you the ability to make a quick decision without needing to see all the data points that make up that credit score. Similarly, with Prodoscore, we can give you a single score, and that single score gives you actionable insight that makes you know for certain, hey, this person needs to be coached up, this person needs to be coached out, whatever it may be, but you don't have to look at all the underlying data points. I think an interesting thing on this is that sub 40 is low productivity and higher than 75. Those numbers used to be different for us, but as I mentioned, we have that outside data group that does all the analytics. And what they found is that that's really those breakpoints. So we continue to refine where low productivity is and where high productivity is. We feel that it's probably pretty accurate going forward and won't need a lot of refinement, but we have refined it over time based on the real world data that we have the opportunity to look at all the time, which is really powerful. And then here's kind of the general around the Prodoscore advantage, right? One thing is it's 15-minute install. I think some people say 15-minute install, and what that means is, yeah, right, 15-minute install. That's actually what we mean, is that we are super easy to install. I think the risk whenever you look at new software is like, oh man, it's gonna be a big undertaking. If any of us have ever gone to Salesforce, we know what that kind of means. It's a huge undertaking. It requires a lot of time on whiteboards and rooms and planning and figuring all this stuff out and fine tuning. That's not us, right? We can deploy quickly, takes 15 minutes. Super easy to use. Everyone can understand it. It just makes sense. As you saw the screenshots there, it's pretty easy data. We have really strong cloud security. So we are very committed to security. We've built the business with security in mind. For me, coming from a cybersecurity background, that's extremely important to me. We can help with the training and support. One of the cool things we do is when we deploy, we grab 90 days of backwards data within the first 24 hours. So it's not like some other artificial intelligence and machine learning tools that take months and months and months and months to get trained and kind of learn on the system and have meaningful data. We can give you actionable data immediately in the first 24 hours that looks at the last 90 days. So we're effective immediately as opposed to like a long learning curve for our system. The end user, probably 50% of our customers tell the end users that they're using Prodoscore and are really transparent around it. The other 50% use it as an executive tool. That really is kind of similar to like how some companies show the P&L and other companies don't. So some companies are very transparent and open around that, and others want to have more executive level tools, but there's no client software. So we don't load anything on the computer. We're all back-end API. So we are not invasive, period, not invasive, where some of the other tools that you kind of see out there sometimes are like super invasive. They can turn on your webcam, they're tracking your keyboard strokes and your mouse movements. There's some really funny YouTube, TikTok videos of people who have those tools deployed where they'll take like a wooden spoon and tape it to an oscillating fan and then tape the mouse to the other end. So as the fan moves, the mouse moves, so they can trick the system into making them think they work. You can't game us like that. We're not invasive. We're back-end APIs where we pull that data from. And then we've got easy deployment services and support, and it is a daily pull of the data. There's nothing you have to do. The scores are refreshed daily based on the data from the day prior. And so it's really actionable and current. So there's a lot of puzzle pieces around this. Figuring out this, return to work thing is hard. My dad was like a big puzzle guy for whatever reason. I don't know. He was a dentist. And dentistry is fine details and all this kind of stuff. And he loved puzzles, and like the craziest puzzle he ever did had this gumball machine on the front side with all these colored gumballs in it. And then the back side of the puzzle had the exact same image from the front, just rotated 90 degrees. So if you found a piece, you would think you had to figure out was it the front or the back. It was a nightmare. And that's a little bit like all of us are trying to figure out with this return to work. A lot of different things going on, a lot of different puzzle pieces. And we're trying to figure out how do we get all these things to come together in a way that makes sense for our employees and for the employers, that everyone gets, what they want. We can help. Right. One of the puzzle pieces we know that we can place for you. And as you know, it's a little bit easier if people start on the edges and then kind of fill in on the puzzle. The places that we know that we can give you clarity and visibility is on your people, right? Who's working, who's not, how much are they working, how much are they engaging with our tools. And we really feel like putting Prodoscore in place is a way that really takes that discussion off the table. So, all right, so we don't have to answer the question anymore, do we know if our people are productive? Now it's a question we have to answer of like, where do they need to be productive? How do we encourage that? How do we enable that? Visibility makes this job a lot easier, and Prodoscore can help. So after this, you're going to get an outreach from Kit's team, and it's going to have ways to engage with us. And we would love to show it to you. If you are a metrics driven company, if you like to make data driven decisions, if you feel like, you've got awesome people and you want to be able to give them the freedom to work from anywhere, then the visibility can help empower that. If you think you got some people that maybe aren't pulling their weight, and you want to know who they are, we can help with that. So let us know how we can help. We would love to. Again, this is a challenging thing. No one's got this licked. Return to work is really hard, but we feel that we can make it a little bit easier for you and move some of that along for you. So that's the conclusion of my presentation here. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat. Do we have any questions?
I think, David, you need to give me back host.
Got it. Stand by. I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, David.
Change host. There you go, Nadine.
All right. And you can still talk. Yeah, you're still talking. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So just a reminder, if there's any questions, please go ahead and type them in either the chat or the Q&A. We do have a couple here, David. Let's pull these up. Okay. So you talked about high and low productivity employees. How do you know if someone has low productivity?
Yeah, that's really the score. So the score that we can present, and that was that little range where below 40 would be low and above 75, would be high. I think that our data shows that, 10% falls into low, 10% falls into high, and 80% kind of falls in that, average there. But I do want to be clear is John Wooden, who was the basketball coach at UCLA, had this old phrase where he said, never confuse activities with accomplishments. Right. And so accomplishments, a lot of companies know accomplishments, sales attainment, stuff like that. But what they don't know are the activities that go into that. So Prodoscore is really that activity data. We can show you what the activities are. And then in your company, you can begin to correlate those between the accomplishments data. And there may be people that you're like, for this job title, we don't need them to be super high productive, but we can definitely give you that quantified score that allows you to then begin to make decisions around, okay, what does this department look like? What does this individual look like? And what do we need to do to coach them up or change some behaviors or model after them or teach our other people to kind of, follow some of their best practices, those types of things.
So that sort of leads into the next question here. How's the score useful? The question is, what should I do with that information as a manager, basically?
Yeah, I think as a manager, it is a data point, right? It is not the data point. Is that, I think the Prodoscore is not one of those things that you hire and fire based on, but it is a data point. I think that when you look at most companies I've been a part of, do these like annual reviews, right? So you sit down, you do an annual review with your manager, and man, it is just filled with qualitative data. Does David live out the core values of the company? Is David a good colleague, or does he have teamwork, or high integrity or whatever? And all these things are very, qualitative. We can very much, give you some quantitative. Was David doing the things that he was supposed to do related to his job? And we don't have to wait until, once a year. You can have this idea of like the process of continual improvement that a lot of companies have. You can begin to have that continual improvement process for your employees on a daily basis. If you're looking at their productivity score, that gives opportunity for the manager to say, hey, you know what? Nadine's score has really, really gone up and it stayed up. What's her workload like? Do we need to give her team more staff? Do we need to increase capacity, in her department? Or is she about to burn out, or whatever it may be? Or it's really gone the other direction, and it invites that conversation. So that's how the score can be useful to the manager, is the check engine light. And again, it doesn't mean it's something horrible, but it means that conversation needs to be had. And it's better to have that conversation early rather than later.
Awesome. There's one more question in here, David. What kind of data does Prodoscore pull in? Do you see everything I'm doing all day?
So we only pull in the backend API data of the company issued applications. So Office, Slack, Salesforce, G Suite, all of those company issued tools. But I don't know if you're on Instagram. I don't know if you're on Facebook. I don't know if you're on eBay. I don't know if you're on any of those things. So we do not put any kind of spyware or any kind of software on your client device that looks at the websites. Again, some of those other pieces of software out there that are super invasive, they can, if you open up your banking information, your personal banking information on a work computer, they can scrape that. That is not the way we are. We are not invasive, period. We work on the back end in the company issued APIs, and then we pull that data out, so the activity data, and then we run it through our algorithm and present the productivity score. So if, what's interesting is that all the data that we scrape is already there, right? So your employer already has access to all this data. We're just rendering it in a nice dashboard and applying a score to it. Anything else?
Those are all the questions that have been submitted.
Great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time today. And I do think that this is a really relevant topic for so many companies, both in America, and we've actually talked to Emily, who's on this call. She and I talked to someone in Ireland and Madrid just last week, and this is a bit hot topic over there. We talked to people in Australia. This is a hot topic there. So this is just a super hot topic that I think you need to be engaging your clients and internally around how do we think about this. And Prodoscore is ready to help, and Kit's team is ready to help as well. As again, we recognize that no one has this licked and everybody's trying to figure it out together.